Hey groupers, Pastor Marshall, Merry Christmas. You didn't know it was time. It's time. It's happening all around us and it's going to start happening in church. This week, Isaiah chapter 9. Are you ready to study Christmas? I talked this last weekend about light, and so let's talk about light. Let's break the ice by sharing some light stories. Not random old light stories like I did on my weekend message, but let's talk about Christmas light stories. What Christmas light story do you have? Let me break the ice. When I was growing up, my mom, my sister, and me, and then after I was about 10, my stepdad went into the picture. But for us, one very important thing of our Christmas tradition were Christmas bubble lights. Now, if you don't know what Christmas bubble lights are, I'm very sorry that you were abused as a child and neglected, because they're just the greatest thing. If you know what they are, then you can imagine these things warm up and the bubbles go up, and well, they were special in our family and they were fragile. My mother was the one that was responsible. While my sister and I were putting decorations on the tree, she was putting up the Christmas bubble lights. And so that's just part of our tradition. It's special to us. Well, what about you? What's special to you when it comes to Christmas and lights? Well, Isaiah 9:2 says that a light has shined in the darkness, or a light has dawned in the shadow of death. And so what I want you to do next is not easy. You're going to have a little time to think about it because, well, the video's playing, so you can plan. But I'd like to know, when was a season in your life of great darkness? What was that season? And how did light dawn? How did light break through your darkness? This is going to require you to be very transparent, vulnerable in front of your group. But I'd like you to do that, and I'll start. When I was in junior high was a very, very dark season in my life. There are a lot of different reasons, just besides it being junior high. One thing that happened is when I was in the 6th grade, the first year of my junior high school, I was hit by a car. Many of you have heard that story, closed head injuries. Well, when it was all over, everything was okay, except one thing had to change, and that was that I was not allowed to play football. And you have to understand, if you're a kid growing up in Texas, football is it. And 7th grade is when you're allowed to start to play for your school. And so all of us Texas kids, we just were training. Everything was preseason in our lives until we got to the 7th grade. And at the end of my 6th grade year, the doctor told my mother he will never be allowed to play football. That was one loss. The next year, I would get kicked in the eye playing soccer, and I would have reconstructive eye surgery. I had to wear a patch, an eye patch, to school for months and months and months. And in the middle of that process, I also had to get glasses. Now, I know that in the world that we live in today, it's like glasses are mod. Like, it's like a cool thing to wear glasses. But trust me, when I was in the 7th grade, it was not a cool thing to wear glasses. So I went from wearing a patch and to wearing a patch and glasses to then being in glasses from that point on. Also, to add to the list, my best friend moved during this season of my life. We went to school together, we played after school together, he lived in my neighborhood, and his parents moved. And so we no longer got to play every day, we certainly didn't get to go to school together. In the midst of that, my dad left my stepmom. And that was the normal marriage in my life. That was what I considered to be a perfect marriage. And all of a sudden I had another broken relationship. And in the midst of that, something very practical. When I was in elementary school, I was a big kid. The pictures of you, I was always on the back row, the tallest kid. I grew early, and then I stopped growing. And in junior high, I went from being the big kid to being the medium kid to being the little kid. I wouldn't grow again until the 10th grade. And that was hard. I went through a season of great darkness in my life. I can remember very clearly laying awake at night in turmoil. I can remember very clearly laying awake at night just stewing on how things in my life were not the way that I wanted them to be. To be perfectly honest with you, I know now that I didn't have any sense of being able to even understand all of these big things that were happening in my life. Physical changes, emotional changes, family changes, friend changes. I wasn't prepared to handle all of those things, but I did. And then God enters Josh into my life. And Josh was a preacher's kid. I went to Woodlawn Christian Church. He went to Alena Christian Church. My church was small, and it was dying on the vine. There were no kids at my church, my sister and me, but Josh's church, which was also small, really about 75 people in it. But it was younger and had a youth group, and all of a sudden, a light dawned. I wonder, what's your story? When did a light dawn in your life? Next, I'd like to talk for just a second about what does it mean to you that Jesus is born. I want just two sides of the coin here. First side of the coin, how does it encourage you? Every Christmas season, when you're reminded that Jesus became flesh and that he was a baby and that he was a boy and that he was raised by Mary and Joseph, how does that encourage you? And then, talk about the other side of that. How does it complicate your faith? Every Christmas, maybe you're reminded of some doubts that you have. That God became a man and he was completely dependent on a woman and a man. And so I just wonder, what does the two sides of the coin look like for you? How does this encourage your faith that Jesus was a baby? And then how does it challenge your faith? And then, before we finish, let's just spend a minute and hover over verse 6. In verse 6, we're given these 4 names of what Jesus is going to be. So it says that he is Wonderful Counselor. This is what I want. I want you to talk about what each one of these names mean to you. So what does it mean to you when it says that Jesus was Wonderful Counselor? How does that connect with you? And then second, it says that he is Mighty God. Do you think of Jesus as Mighty God? Or do you have him kind of in a different box? And then it says that he is Everlasting Father. How does it settle in your mind that Jesus is eternal? Eternal past, eternal present. How does that sit with you? And then finally, it says that he is Prince of Peace. Where has that found place in your heart? What does it mean to you that Jesus is Prince of Peace? Last, let's talk about the secularization of Christmas. It is a capitalist dream, Christmas is. It's when we talk about how companies make up for the year's lost profits, and they want to get to Christmas and see the end of the year. And so I don't think that it's going to change. I don't think that Christmas was going to get less secular. The more that our culture is capitalistic and driven by that, I think that Christmas will be driven by that. So what I'm wondering is, in the midst of the secularization of this Christian holiday, how have you learned to season the secularization with grace and truth? And I believe that those two things are essential. We know plenty of people that season it with truth, and it's just almost painful watching them confront their family and confront their friends in not a very nice way. He's the reason for the season. That's not full of grace. So I'm just wondering, what good ideas have you learned? What good ideas have you practiced that you have found to have worked, where you have been able to try to penetrate this secularization with some grace and truth? Well, every week we talk about what we like, and every week we talk about what we don't like. And what I really like in this passage is it says that a light has dawned, and it says that his peace, in the very last verse, will have no end. I love that. I love the idea of his peace having no end. And then what do you not like? We'll really have to go back to chapter 8. What sets the stage for this passage? It says that the Jewish people, these were God's people. These were people that knew God, were consulting mediums and spiritists. That just kind of makes me shudder. I don't like that. And then application just reminds you of what we talked about this last weekend, what we're trying to do. How will you share the true meaning of Christmas light this week? How will you share the true meaning that a light has dawned this week? Well, I hope that you have a great group, and I look forward to seeing you next weekend as we continue our Christmas study. God bless.